back with Andrew Thornton, and he has a great idea for creating bead caps. I love this. This is so fabulous, making texture.
Oh, thanks.
You're welcome. Take a look at the necklace, and it's also asymmetrical. So that's something that you use in your jewelry a lot too. It doesn't always have to be matching on both sides.
Well, the thing I love about this design is that it's really simple and wearable.
You could wear this. This is everyday wear. You're right.
Yeah, and the great thing is that since it's so simple, it really draws attention to the bead cap, and it makes the stone a focal.
Definitely. So do you always use this technique with a teardrop shaped bead?
No, you can actually use a round bead, but you'd want to use a head pin instead of having the teardrop. But if you're going to use a briolette, you're going to want to first cut off a piece, like 4 inches. Depending on the hole size that you use, you'll want to go up or down in the size or the gauge of the wire. So I just cut off a piece about 4 inches or so. I centered the briolette, and then I'm going to move the tails up. Since I'm right-handed, I want this tail to be up because it makes it just a little bit easier. I notch it around like this and just start bending over. And this is a great technique because if you're not a perfect wire wrapper, you can hide it. So, and then when I get down to the end, I don't like to use my fingers because it can cut your fingers. So I just bend this around and make sure that you tuck in the wire as best as possible.
Okay.
Yep, and then, so you've got this guy sticking out, and you're going to use your round nose pliers. Round nose pliers are great because you use that to manipulate the wire to create a shape. With this, you're going to be moving the wire. So I just use this to create a loop. And remember, since it is going to be covered, it doesn't have to be perfect. And I just hold that stationary and wrap it around.
Great.
And one thing I should mention is that everybody wire wraps differently.
That's right.
So if you see somebody wrapping it differently, it's not wrong, it's just different. All right, so when you've got this ready, I generally make a couple extras because if I pull off extra clay, then I can use it instead of just pitching the clay.
Sounds good.
So I'm gonna put on my gloves. Some people have skin sensitivities to epoxy clay. So it's a good way for you not to get your hands sticky and dirty.
Right.
And then
there are so many different things that you can do with epoxy clay too. It's fun to see this. It looks really organic.
Oh yeah, and epoxy clay is like any medium. You can do really anything. And in the book, there's just a ton of different techniques that you can use. With this one, and I stress this because all epoxy clays are different, is that you read the manufacturer's instructions because sometimes the ratios are different. For this one, it's 2 pieces that are about the same size. It's a part A and a part B. And you want to mix that thoroughly so that it all becomes one color and is uniform. Yeah,
so you can tell that it's totally mixed when the gray disappears, right?
Yeah. And then we've actually
there you go. You have one ready to go.
It's like magic. And then when I do this, I want to pull off a piece that's about the shape and size of a garbanzo pea or chickpea, and I just roll it into a ball and flatten it out. And then I push this in there and I embed it.
Oh, all right.
Yep. So this is and you just work the clay around. It's a super, super simple technique. And you get a lot of bang for your buck because it looks really organic and different. You can, like I said, save different stones that you have.
Yeah, and well, you're using natural stones here, but you could do this on crystal or you could do this on glass. Any type of surface would work. But I like the way this makes it look like the way that it comes when the stones come out of the ground. So you have that kind of matte but shiny finish at the top that's heavily textured like the rock would be before it's polished.
And the thing about this is you don't necessarily have to use a rough texture. You can use a pattern. So what I've done here is I've put the clay around the top of the bale, but what we'll do is gently press this down. You can use a cuticle stick. I made this out of African porcupine quill. It's one of my favorite sculpting tools. And then say your bale gets buried. All you do is just dig it out a little bit, just enough that you can see the hole.
Okay.
And then you have two different options. You can either add chatons at this point or flatbacks. All you have to do is put a little bit of beeswax on the end of a shish kebab skewer or toothpick. I just use this because on my paintbrush, and you just pick it up and set it. And then at that point, you just press it in.
So you want to make sure that it's covering the edges a little bit.
Yeah, and then you want to squeeze it around. Not bury it completely, but just so that it won't pop off later on.
Yeah.
And then so I'll do another.
Can you add a few more crystals to that one for us?
Sure.
Okay.
You can go. And the thing that I love about this is that you can really customize it and make it your own. So you could add as many or as few as you like.
Sure. Again, I like the idea that that's the way that the rock looks before it's polished. You know, especially with quartz, you would see a little bit of shininess inside.
Oh, yeah. And the nice thing is that you can really stud it, and it gives it a nice little textural element.
So now if you do want to texture this piece, not to skip ahead, but if you prepare this first with the crystals.
Yes. You want to make sure that you do this before you do the next step, and that's because if you put the metallic powder as a release agent, it will make it harder for the crystals to stick in. Okay. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just preparing another one. And you really want to make sure that you're squeezing it firmly so that it really gets in the grooves of the wire. Because if you kind of don't press it in too firmly, it will, fall off or chip off or be loose. And you want to make sure that it's fully adhered.
About how long do you have to work with it before it becomes too hard to manipulate?
Well, it really depends on the clay. Some clays set up as fast as 3 minutes, and some you have a good couple hours, actually.
Okay. So,
like I said, it's very important to read the instructions. All right. So once you've got it set up like this, what we'll do is we'll dip our paintbrushes into the metallic powder. It's important that you use good ventilation or you don't breathe this in, because some of it has fine metal powder and it's no good.
Okay, so obey safety precautions.
Yes, read the safety instructions. But what you'll do is just lightly paint it on. And I love to put down wax paper before I get started, because then when you're finished, you can just pitch it and you don't have to worry about getting sponges out and soaping down the place. You can just crumble it up. So what this acts as is a resist. So it's basically the flour on the baking, the rolling pin. Yep. And so
Great.
It's and also not only does it prevent your texture from sticking, but it also gives color.
Right, so you could use different colors of metallic powder here if you wanted to.
And if you don't want to use metallic powders, you don't have to. If you are concerned about safety, you can use cornstarch, or you could use marble dust or pearlescent pigments. There's mica powders. And if you want the color to stay, just go around real quick and press it in.
Okay.
And you might have to open the hole up again. All right, so once that's ready, you will pick your texture. Now I have a nut here, I have a rock, I have a button, I have a texture tool, and these can all be used
to create different effects, I would suppose.
So once you dust on. Make sure there's a healthy dusting. Then you can just roll away.
All right.
And you want to make sure that your edges are smooth, because otherwise it starts to look like a piece of chewed up bubble gum.
Yeah, we don't want the chewed up gum effect, huh?
No, you could if you like that, but. And this is a great tool because you can get in there. And it's nice. Texture sheets are good for flat parts, but if you want to get into the nooks and crannies, you really need something that's going to have the shape. You can use the end of a rock or anything, really.
Is there anything special to know about adding the gold metallic powder to the one that has crystals? Is it the same exact process?
It's the same exact process. It looks a little bit different. Another thing is if you have a pattern that you want to be clear and you don't want it to get muddied, you want to make sure that you press firmly and evenly and you don't go over multiple times. Because if you go over multiple times, what will happen is that the pattern will just get distorted.
Okay. I think we get the idea there. So on these couple of pieces too, I want to be sure to mention we're almost out of time.
Okay.
But we want to be sure to mention that you can also dry brush paint onto this and give it some dimension.
Well, it's a way to make the texture really pop. So you don't want to forget to do this because it really adds another dimension. So what I do is I take a little bit of acrylic paint and just dry brush it on real evenly.
So this is after your piece is textured and it's cured.
Yes.
You've let it dry probably overnight. And then you dry brush.
Yeah, dry brush it on. And it, like I said, it doesn't have to be really super even. It can be a little bit messy, but then you just wipe it off.
Great. And then you have to seal this, right?
Yep. Let it dry and then seal it.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Andrew. These are some great creative ways of bringing art into your jewelry.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right, let's take a look at this ring before we go. This is so pretty. And another sculptural way to use epoxy clay.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to be in Crystal Wick's recent book, and it's just a fun way to incorporate sculpture with epoxy clay.
Beautiful. Thanks, Andrew.